and continue to be in the forefront of both climate change adaptation and building community resilience. Leveraging the innovation and crucial roles women play as catalysts for resilience, peace building, reconstruction, and adaptation not only furthers the effective implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda in Africa, but also consolidates recovery and peace building efforts. So this particular session that we are going to go through is going to identify the avenues to leverage the transformative potential of women's role in enhancing preparedness, resilience, and coping mechanisms towards a more comprehensive effort and sustainable solution for durable peace and development. So taking us through this journey collectively, we start off with really someone who really does not need an introduction. She has been part of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda for over 30 years. So this is the Special Envoy for Women, Peace and Security, Her Excellency Benita Diop, who is joining us online. And I'll start with you by asking, when you look at the implementation of WPS in Africa, it has been evolving based on the changing landscapes that we had, the cascading risks we've been discussing. What is the impact of the current global crisis on efforts to advance the Women, Peace and Security Agenda in Africa? And in particular, do you think is the potential of your office, and especially the new initiatives, in leveraging African women's roles as catalysts for resilience and unlocking their transformative potential in the face of the complex cascading risks, including climate change? So over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. And let me congratulate the organizer of the ASWAN Forum and for making sure that we have the conversation around women participation, but also the leadership of women to build resilience. And I'm sorry I'm not with you today. I missed the ASWAN Forum. But let me salute to all the panelists and say all protocol observed, duly observed. So let me just highlight, maybe by setting the tone, 3 crises that are, pertinent to our conversation that affect the WPS agenda in Africa, recently. I think you talk about issues of climate change. You talk about our conflict that is erupting in Africa, but also the conflict that we have seen in Ukraine crisis as well, and the COVID-19, that pandemic. So let me just start with the first one, the COVID-19 pandemic. I think it continues because we are not out of the battle against COVID-19. The challenge that we have faced and continue to face, and during COVID, what we have found is, the violence, the gender-based violence everywhere, not just in Africa. We say 45% of women have been exposed to violence against women. And these were highest in countries like Kenya, South Africa, Morocco, Nigeria. So you name a few countries where we have seen such cases. So the pandemic has been aggravated by the existing risks faced by women in communities. And what we have seen also, the continue is the patriarchal norms and system that kept the women out of decision-making as well, and which, increased their vulnerability. The other issues that I have also seen, the second one is the climate, and many of us talk about how this exacerbated our conflict in Africa and the impact of our women and girls. Instability, and you can look at the Lake Chad Basin, where I have been myself to meet women that have been exposed, but women who have been even suicide bombers, who are exploding their body, but who are back. But when you look at the root cause of those, of course, they have the extremists there, but it's the shrinking of the natural resources such as the water, the lake are shrinking, but also the fact that they have to go long road to fetch firewood. So those are the consequences linking to the climate change. And for them, having a lot of initiatives that we wanted to see happening, solution in adaptation, but also making sure that they have access to resources coming to the green climate response, but it's not happening really. So for me is that the next COP coming to Egypt will be a solution that we have to bring the issues of women's solution at the table and see how public-private can support. So we need to have the conversation around climate change and the linkage with conflict in our continent. So now coming to the issues of crisis in the African continent and the impact of Ukraine. And I think this is what we're experiencing. We have the health issues, we have the economic issues, but now it's what we call the 3F, the food, the fuel, and the finance, which is really impacting on the life of the women. The food prices, the higher fuel prices are there. We have seen the difficulties in terms of the accessing international capital market and so much. I'm sure that we will talk about the inflation that is rapid inflation. So these are issues that are hindering, as we say, the leadership capacity of women and their leadership in decision-making processes. So get into all what women are doing to be resilient in this global crisis. I'm sure it will be debated, but what my office is doing, because that's your last questions, during COVID, we convene with ministers of foreign affairs, ministers of health, of gender, to look at how we can make sure that we have guidelines for post-COVID recovery or even adaptation during the COVID guidelines to help our government in response by having the gender lens that you said. And by doing this, it's also related to climate change, because we need to make sure that we have the tools, and those tools have been adopted by the African Union within the responses to COVID-19 responses at the global level. The other issues that we do in my office, as you say, we have now 30 countries that have adopted national action plan, and we have regional action plan, and I'm very happy that Yvette is there, because the regional bodies are also adopting their regional action plan. But its climate indicators should be right at the front, and climate change, but also other issues that affect women, their participation, the protection, etc. So what we did at the African Union with the 30 countries that have action plan, and I congratulate Egypt for developing their national action plan. So what we do is to have a continental result framework, because we need to account. It's not just about policy, but it's about implementation. It's about action that can alleviate and can redress the situation of women on Earth. So we have strategies to leverage the WPS agenda with the people-centered approach in response to COVID, to climate, but also to conflict. So what we do with my staff is, making sure that we report the member state report and the regional economic committees that are the one implementing the WPS to make sure that we look at the right indicators, but also we empower our states to implement, but also to be accountable to the women themselves. So we have created a global network, because what we need as African is for the building the resilience, one cannot do it, but we need to do the chain. For example, on the issues of women in mediation, we have FemWise and trickle down everywhere to have women mediators, because women need to be at the table. Without their voices and their face and their agenda, I don't think that we will implement whatever we think that should redress the situation. We will not be able to be effective and efficient. So women have to be there. So having the critical mass of women mediators are really important. Not just the framework, like National Action Plan, Regional Action Plan, and the CRF, which is the Continental Result Framework, and the report that the chairperson Musa Faki publishes every year. That is important too. But what we need is to look at solution platform, like as I said, FemWise, but also another platform, because Africa Women Leaders Network, that is bringing the agenda, development agenda, because peace and security cannot be isolated from the development agenda, Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030, because we need to make sure that climate issues of development, the financing of it, all these are part and parcel of the financial inclusion of women and their economic empowerment. So OWLIN as a platform that galvanized effort and put together different actors, UN, AU, our government, but driven by women leaders in Africa to make sure that we respond. We have 29 national chapters right now out of 55 countries. Egypt is part of it. And we make sure that we respond by doing solidarity mission. Those are solutions. To go to the field and listen to the women, look at the crises that impact on them, but finding solutions. And solutions like one-stop centers where women have their safe space is one. Capacity building of women is another way of supporting them. Financial inclusion, making sure that the budget address some of those issues. National budget to the women's solutions are also those kind of solutions that we wanted to see happening. So I will not go, I know that we are very late. I wanted to highlight what the African Union is doing, but it has to be driven by the women themselves. It's not a top-down approach, it's the bottom-up approach as well. So it has to go hand in hand, and that's why we need to bring young people. And I'm sure that in Aswan, you have the youth voices. We need to have this intergenerational discussion, because women peace and peace process, women peace and security is a process, as we say. One cannot do it. It needs generation. We say silencing the gun, and we have seen a lot of threat. I don't dwell on that. We have the coup d'etat happening right now in West Africa and other regions. How do we address this in a longer term? By taking the generation to discuss, but also making sure that those solutions that we found on the ground can be scaled up for us to be able to bring peace and stability in our continent. So leave no one behind, and make sure that we work hand in hand, the African Union, our government, civil society, women's group, where we put policy, the ecosystem to make sure that we protect women and they participate in peace building. So I stop there, and I'm very happy that Aswan Forum is taking this very up, and we congratulate all the future speakers on the panel. I have to present my apologies to all of you, because I have another meeting right now, but I wanted to be there, but also not being physically, but bringing my contribution as, especially in Boy of the African Union, for Musa Faki of the African Union Commission. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Madam Diop, and also for taking the time to stay behind despite us starting a little bit late to pass in your message. So my key takeaway from one of the key things she's mentioned, quite a number, but for me, we've been talking about the regional action plans and women, peace and security agendas, especially even at the national level. So it's very interesting about the push to ensure that climate indicators are now being included more strongly in national action plans as well as at the regional level. So we'll be discussing this as we continue with our discussions today. So I look closely to Peter, Ambassador Peter, and I hope I pronounced this correctly, Waitaru, who is the Special Envoy for Religion in Conflict and Peace Building with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kingdom of Sweden. Sweden was actually the first country in the world to pursue a feminist foreign policy with the aim of contributing to gender equality and full empowerment of women and girls. So in most of the times when we discuss issues to do with women, peace and security, we look at Sweden as a prominent champion. And so my question to you today is, how does Sweden, that engages with many African stakeholders in advancing women's meaningful roles, especially as we're looking at cascading risks, how does Sweden ensure agile and integrated financing mechanisms that prioritize the advancing of women, peace and security agenda within the context of women climate action?
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and Your Excellencies, dear friends. Salam alaikum. I'm very grateful for the CCCPA for the invitation and the honor, also as a man, to participate in this important panel on the role of women in peacemaking in Africa. I should also say I'm very happy to be back in Egypt. I served for some years as director for the Swedish Dialogue Institute in Alexandria and learned to both love that remarkable city and the Egyptian people. So it's very nice to be back. You described Sweden, Moderator, as a kind of gender and women, peace and security champion, and I highly appreciate, of course, that acknowledgement. Sweden's commitment to women, peace and security should reflect our own experience with improving women's participation in our own society. Although Sweden still has a long way to go before we can say we are a truly gender equal society, I'm very proud of the development the last decades. And I would say that politics have been the front runner in Sweden for women's participation. For 28 years now, since 1994, all Swedish cabinets have been gender equal, 10 women and 10 men. In the Swedish Foreign Ministry where I served, we have during the last 30 years served under 8 different foreign ministers. 6 of them have been women. Most political parties in Sweden have today equal numbers of men and women on their list for elections to national parliament, to regions, to municipalities. And this means, translating to that, more than 40% of all locally elected in all over Sweden are women. 5 out of 9 party leaders in the parliament are women. This result has nothing to do with history, nothing to do with culture, nothing to do with tradition. Sweden was not a front runner for women's right to vote, nor for women's right to education. In fact, the first ever female student who was enrolled at the university, her name was Betty Pettersson, started her education in medicine as late as 1872. 1,000 years before that, in 859, Fatima Al-Firi, a Muslim African woman, founded the El Karaim University in Fez, Morocco. So for deeper roots, I think we can look for wisdom from this region rather than from Europe. But the Swedish achievements for equality, I would say, is the result of 3 factors: strong political commitment, democracy, and by listening to science. No prime minister today in Sweden dare to challenge the principle of an equal gender cabinet if they would like to be re-elected, because gender equality in decision making gives better result. It gives better decisions. And we should have the same approach when looking for how to have an integrated response to climate threats, while also advancing the women, peace and security agenda. Strong political commitment, a democratic approach, and listen to science. We know that the effects of climate change are not gender equal. Environmental crises hit the most disadvantaged the hardest. Poor women are most affected. They have less access to human rights, such as the ability to move freely or acquire land, and they face systematic violence that escalates during instability. The International Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, tells us that climate change intensifies. Women are likely to struggle the most. They get heavier workloads, more emotional stress, and face also higher mortality rate compared to men. At the same time, women are active in leading climate movements and building communities that prioritize sustainability. As we tackle climate challenges, we need to recognize that climate and gender equality are cross-cutting issues, where coherence in policy implementation is key. Policymakers, be it in climate funds, in development banks or elsewhere, need to apply a strong gender perspective when developing and reviewing climate policies and positions. We need to push for concrete measures to involve women and girls and integrate a gender perspective into all climate efforts. And as a development actor, Sweden will continue to walk side by side with partners in Africa to seek the strongest possible implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Our commitment to multilateral cooperation, to international law, and to allocate 1% of our gross national product to development cooperation have not changed because of our recent new orientation for our security policy. And our network of female Swedish peace negotiator, a most practical tool to support women in peace processes, is actively assisting female partners in 7 African conflicts at the moment. They are training, advising, mentoring, including stimulating the establishment of local networks of female negotiators. Additional women involved in conflict resolution result in more peace. We can debate how much is related to biology and how much is a result of social experience. But we know from statistics that women are far less likely to resort to violence and more creative in finding solutions of compromise in conflicts. And the same pattern can be found in preventing polarization in society and hence also future conflict. The global trend of authoritarian populism with extreme right-wing policies in Europe and the West, or sectarianism and democratic limitations in Africa and the Middle East, is supported by men rather than women, by old rather than young, by rural rather than urban, by low-educated rather than high-educated. Today, as well as before the World War II, a main reason for breakdown of democracy, international institution and civilization is the inability of the establishment to be relevant to its people, to solve burning issues, and to provide hope for the future. Of course, women can also be deeply skeptical to establishment, and they can react by protesting, by withdrawing from political involvement, or by not voting. But while more of the older male generation anti-establishment approach can turn into intolerance, policies of hatred, and isolation, women, and clearly the young and educated ones, are more open-minded, more tolerant, more gender equal, more environmentally concerned, and more supportive of human rights than any other generation before them. The conflict we are facing is not between anti-establishment and authorities. The conflict is between civilization and barbarism. And most women are not part of the problem. They are part of the solution. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this important dialogue.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador, for even reminding us that gender equality in decision-making gives better results. This is absolutely why we even made sure that we have men in the panel and also including young people as well, so that we have really a diverse group of people sharing their knowledge. So thank you for that. The importance of political will cannot be overstated. So it's really, really good to have Excellency Zuwaira Gamba, who is the Commissioner for Women Affairs and Social Development from Borno State, the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We just had a team from Borno sharing their experiences about how they're leading efforts towards the massive defections that we are seeing in Borno State. When we talk about terrorism, in most cases we put a man's face towards it, because it's a discussion that always says it's young boys, it's young men who are joining extremist organizations. And it would be really critical to hear your take on what do you think are women's impact when it comes to addressing terrorism, especially when we are looking at building resilience to extremism, and how can we capitalize on that based on your experience within looking at defections in Borno State. So welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My own approach is going to be different. It's not just about the role of women, but about being part and parcel of the entire process, about having to spend time with ex-defectors, about sharing experiences with victims. Borno State has been at the center of the insurgency in the last 13 years. But I think it is expedient, before I make my remarks, I want to acknowledge with a deep sense of gratitude the efforts of the organizers. We feel this is for Borno people because it's going to create an opportunity for the challenges we are facing in Borno State to be addressed at the global platform. So we want to thank you most sincerely for this opportunity. The brief of the Commissioner for Women Affairs and Social Development, in addition to our statutory duties, include coordinating interventions and other activities that relate to handling the defectors across the various camps, namely the one in Bulunkutu, the other one at Shokari, and the largest of all at the Hajj Camp Transit Center. My governor has spoken, and our sister from the NSA office also talked about the Operation Safe Corridor program that is going on in Gombe. Yes, from Gombe, before they are integrated to their communities, they are also handed over to the Borno State government. And yes, as at 16th July last year, we had massive surrenders. You have heard figures of over 60,000, but I want to make some little clarification. Over 70% of that 60,000 are women and children. The men amongst them are either fighters or young men who were forcefully conscripted to take part in the insurgency, even though all of them are kept in our custody. Another aspect that I also want to clarify is the mere fact that majority of them are also farmers. They were abducted at their various farms. They themselves are victims. And so there was I wish Catherine was around, about the processes of screening and profiling. His Excellency didn't have time to explain this. We have a very standard operation procedure on ground. We just don't take them and then release them. No. There is a process that involves all the various security agencies, the SS, the military intelligence, the police, the civilian JTF, and of course our traditional rulers and religious leaders. So when they defect from the bush, they are received at the point of entry to whatever community by the military authority, who brings them to the reception center, and thank God the military officer, retired though General Abdullah Ishaq, is the special advisor to His Excellency on security. He is here. He does the profiling with our other colleagues. Before they are even left with us, they take oath. They have to swear on the Quran. After all the screening, the profiling, investigations have been done. And if you're a farmer and it is confirmed that you are a farmer, you swear on the Quran that yes, I'm a farmer. Then your community leaders, the local government chairman, the religious leader, and the traditional rulers take you back to your community, where you are accepted because you yourself, you are a victim. So we have to understand these processes very clearly. It's not as if they just come, take them into custody, and then release them. No. Those that are still remaining in our custody are those that took, committed different levels of criminal acts when they were in Sambisa. But for those who were themselves captured, and then we have so many unaccompanied children and minors, we do family tracing in collaboration with our partners. Oh, sorry, I think it's maybe because I talk too much with the insurgents, I forget I'm supposed to use the microphone. So basically, because these insurgents or defectors are brought to the ministry, they are kept in the custody of women because 90% of the workers in the ministry are women. Why? Because of the empathy, because of the trust that a woman easily gets from not only insurgents. If a woman says this, it is usually that. So I think that is why His Excellency, in his own wisdom, decided to domicile such a responsibility in the Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Development. Again, I think it's because women, honestly, are catalysts of developmental programs. That zeal, that love that a woman has for her child, she tends to extend it to whoever is kept in her care. So that has made it very convenient, and I think well thought out plan by the government of Borno State to, when all the processes have been done, the guys are handed over to the Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Development, and it is a privilege for us to be given that opportunity to collaborate and serve with other stakeholders so that we can reignite the hope of the people of Borno, as well as usher in a new era of peace and prosperity within the shortest time possible, as envisioned by the United Nations Secretary General when he came to visit us a couple of weeks ago. It is a common knowledge that in every conflict situation, women and children make up the majority of the vulnerable. In such challenging situations, women are acknowledged to always rise to the occasion, coming handy as caregivers. It is equally important to note that the extent to which they are affected is also directly proportionate to the extent to which their children are affected, if not more. And of course, Borno State is not an exemption. For every 10 people we receive in the camp, 6 will be women and children, or even 8. General is signaling me. So the majority of the victims of the insurgency are women and children. And even when they go to attack communities, they take away the men and their wives and children. And a man could have 4 wives and probably 15 children. So if you add, that's about 20 plus himself, 21. Out of this 21 figure, 20 are victims. Just one man is taken away, probably by just another man. Women, young boys, and girls have been abducted forcefully, conscripted, or used for domestic chores in the bush, while many adolescent girls are known to have been forcefully married off to combatants and consequently becoming child mothers and unplanned for family way before adulthood. There are verifiable records of teenage girls deployed on suicide missions, some of which were successful, while others had been promptly intercepted by the brilliant collaborative efforts of the military and the civilian. I know, and I can list at least 10 of such young girls that had attempted to go on suicide missions. 3 of them didn't succeed. They brought us, we rehabilitated them. Some were picked by the military, taken to the barracks. After some time, they bring them out. We've also had some that lost their lives in the process. And so again, women and girls are the most vulnerable in such circumstances. In many respects, the horrifying activities, the rampaging insurgents have cast a pall across communities, with telltale signs, empty houses occasioned by the gruesome killing of the head of such homes. Children have watched their parents and protectors killed right in their presence, while many mothers have also been visited with the misfortune of helplessly watching their children and wards abducted without hope of ever seeing them again. That is how horrendous it has been in many communities. And that is what the women in the Women Affairs do. Our directors, our social workers, that are our foot soldiers, provide the necessary mental health and psychosocial support to these women and children. They are kept in our custody, in addition to providing them with welfare, shelter, and the rest of it. Of paramount importance is treating them and getting them out of their traumatized situation. Because even when they come out of the bush, when you sit and listen to their experiences, you have that feeling, that pain, that anger. So it is important that when they are brought to the Ministry of Women Affairs, we ensure that we remove that trauma from them. We provide them with the psychosocial support. Some even come up with mental health, with mental psychological challenges and psychiatric issues. What we do, we liaise with bigger hospitals on a referral basis and make sure that they are given and provided with holistic treatment before we reintegrate them, especially the minors. You see a girl of 8 to 10 years being raped in the bush, and then somehow she manages to escape. She doesn't even know where her parents are. After, with proper counseling, we get to trace the families and then do family reunification in collaboration with our partners. For the children and women, UNICEF is the team lead, while UNDP, as earlier explained by His Excellency, is leading the stabilization process for ex-defectors. Our collective drive towards strengthening the resilience of the affected population in Borno through the many interactions have provided our team the opportunity to understand the different ways the protracted conflict has and is currently impacting on the women and children's population. Most of our activities, as I said, are mostly women. Okay, the Ministry of Women Affairs is mostly, populated by women. All the female directors are women. And of course, I'm the commissioner. We had a female PAMSEP who had to retire. We had an acting man, he's in an acting capacity. But most of the staff are women. Even if you go to the local government areas, our development officers are women. Our social workers are women. Our cooks mostly are women, but we do bring in the men to help us with the physical turning of the food. But because we believe that a woman, no matter where you place her, is a mother first. And this has helped tremendously because The trick of the whole thing is because we're able to gain the trust and confidence of the defectors through the security advisor and our religious advisor as well. They're able to invite their other colleagues from the bush. And that again leads us to the issue of transitional justice. Making an ex-insurgent accept or even to prosecute him as somebody that has killed is a very difficult situation. Because whatever you have is based on self-confessions. And he has surrendered. And we all know the laws, both the Islamic and even the natural law says that once somebody surrenders, then we didn't say they will not be prosecuted, but you also have to take it easy because it is them that are helping us bring out their colleagues from the bush. So it's a very dicey process, where, as His Excellency said, we are between the devil and the deep blue sea. It is either we accept them for now and manage them until justice takes its proper course, or we let them remain in the bush and then the fight continues. Since they came out in July, I think we've not had up to 3 attacks. And you can go to Monguno, you can go to Mafa, you can go to Dikwa, even Damaturu. My neighbor was abducted by Boko Haram along Damaturu, Maiduguri. She escaped from ISWAP 3 weeks ago. For 2 years, she was kept in their custody. So for us, whatever the price, and that is where our traditional rulers and religious leaders are preaching in the mosques and the church and the palaces, that we have to choose. Either we collect them and manage the situation, or we continue with the attacks. There has been bumper harvest in Borno in the last 1 year, simply because there are no more attacks.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner, for that insightful comment. We can actually see the passion as you are sharing your experiences. It's actually quite clear the importance of ensuring that women are critical stakeholders, especially when you're looking at the issue of PRR, which we had discussed earlier, and as well as bringing out the issue of mental health, which sometimes we forget as a key ingredient when we are addressing violent extremism. Looking at the issue of defectors. So we'll swiftly move on, and I would like to encourage the panelists to try and keep it to 5 minutes so that we can be able to cover as much as possible this evening. So our next panelist is Commissioner for the Promotion of Gender, Human and Social Development from the Economic Community of Central African States. This is ECAS. This is Madam Kapinga Yvette Nandu. So you heard from Her Excellency, Madam Diop, who actually talked about regional action plans and the importance of regional action plans, including issues to do with climate change as well. So ECAS has introduced tools and strategies that ensure promotion of social development and gender-responsive approaches in its institutional responses. So it's institutionalizing gender mainstreaming in particular. So it would be interesting to hear from you, what are some of the good practices that are there to institutionalize gender mainstreaming for effective and inclusive disaster risk reduction?
I hope I can be heard audibly. Thank you very much. Now, first of all, before I answer your question, I'll try to limit myself to 4 minutes if that helps. But I couldn't start my presentation without thanking profusely our host country, the government of Egypt, for organizing this platform. But even more so, I want to congratulate them because it seems to be a tradition in Egypt. I recall very vividly, about 12 years ago, the government of Egypt had instituted the high-level retreat of special envoys and mediators, and I believe that also has contributed quite a lot to building the knowledge around peace negotiation and peacemaking on the continent. So very, very important for the continent of Africa to building that community of practitioners on the continent. I also thank the CCCPA because I believe they're also a key partner in this venture. It's important for me to, as Madame Diop has said, to support the agenda, the Women, Peace and Security agenda, and salute the fabulous work that the women in this particular field have done over the course of the years. I believe this predates all of us. This is not a new agenda. The Women, Peace and Security agenda is a very old one, but I believe it's only about 22 years ago, in 2000, when Resolution 1325 of the United Nations was passed, that we started really to organize ourselves and monitor the efforts that were being done at the continental level, sub-regional level, and a national level. Madame Diop has rightly said that since the validation of that UN resolution has started about 22 years ago, a lot of member states have adhered to that agenda and to that movement. Very few, I believe, are lacking behind. In my particular sub-region, I believe out of 11 member states, only 2 do not yet have a national action plan on 1325, and also looking at the subsequent resolution of the United Nations, I believe 6 of them looking at mainstreaming gender in peace negotiation processes, and in fact in the whole course. But I think in retrospect, and I believe that goes back to the question that you've raised, what are the dividends? What are the lessons? What are the takeaways that we can borrow from that particular movement when it comes to mainstreaming gender in a particular processes and in this context in peace and security? What have been the impacts? It is true when you look at the statistics, and I believe there are many statistics that show that the number of women adhering or participating officially in peace processes or whatever negotiation processes we can be talking about is still very low. It is low for a number of reasons. I'm not going to delve into those today, but I believe the soft contributions of UN Resolution 1325 and what it has brought forth, I believe, for the cause and for us today looking at climate security, it is creating a critical mass of women who have been drawn, some naturally, others have been compelled to join the movement of practitioners who work on peace negotiation, peace and security in general. You can look at early warning, conflict prevention, peace building, peacekeeping, are now becoming increasingly genderized, if I can use that word. Even though the official process may not necessarily be so at the rate that we are expecting it to be, there is now a grand mass of women at the local level, at the community level, who are actively influencing and playing the role of, I would say, watchdogs or influencers of the formal peace processes that take place in closed setting, in closed doors, and that are often very politicalized and very difficult to adhere to. And I believe this, I would call them this standby team of women who have been now working on these issues for a number of years should be tapped into when it comes to climate security. And I believe that's where we haven't yet really created that nexus. What are we doing with that wealth and that community of practitioners, of women who have been working on peace and security issues? And increasingly, I've heard the word early warning discussed a lot. Secretary General Guterres mentioned it. The chairperson of the AU Commission, Moussa Faki, talked about it, and I believe others have also joined that narrative. It's important to realize and to recognize that women, for the past 20 plus years, have been at the forefront when it comes to information sharing, data collection, data analysis, and sometimes informing early warning initiatives. So I believe it's important to build on what already exists and not to marginalize it. There are other lessons learned that I would also like to inform our process, the process that we're discussing about today, when it comes to mainstreaming gender in DRR. One of which I must insist, and I think that is something that can be looked upon as we are building up the process towards COP27. It appears from where we are standing from a sub-regional point of view that member states' awareness and member states' intent to mainstream gender in continental, sub-regional, and national action plans or guidelines is not yet what it should be. I believe, for instance, when we're talking about the AU, and I believe the commissioner in charge of environment of the AU has discussed it, Africa seems to have been able to put in place a regional plan of action and guidelines for mainstreaming disaster risk assessment into development, in which the importance of gender has been mentioned, but I believe the extent of the coverage is not yet where it should be, and I think there is an opportunity for us to improve that. One thing that Madame Diop has also mentioned, which I want to emphasize, is this local content, which informs awareness building and drives bottom-up approaches when it comes to management, crisis management, and in this case, climate security. I think it is one that should be invested in, the community-based initiatives, and I believe the case in point, the case of Nigeria, is one that also gives us a lot of food for thought, but it's one that makes, that makes a very strong case for promoting and investing. And when I say investing, I don't mean just in supporting initiatives, but really putting finances where it is required in order to give traction to those local-based initiatives. I believe other good practices also would relate to training and capacity building. I believe not enough of it when it comes to climate security is being invested in, and the role of women in this particular area is one that can be beefed up. There is also a very poor understanding, and it's sad to say 24 plus years after Beijing, etc., a very poor understanding of what gender really is, gender mainstreaming. I think we continue to practice it in a very haphazard way, if not haphazard, sometimes in a ghettoized way, excuse me to use that word. And I think there are opportunities here to clarify what the concept of gender mainstreaming is all about. And I believe in DRR and the linkages between DRR and gender mainstreaming is important to strike right. It has been a struggle, we all know, in peace and security, but it's a takeaway that we can borrow from, and to see what has been the process of clarifying that concept in peace and security and in climate security as well. I will end, and that is only because I don't want to drag the session more than it needs to. It's important, I believe, for gender mainstreaming to be effective in DRR, to institutionalize a genuine political accountability and financial resources mobilization process or platform. One that enables the commitment to the issue to be largely documented and financed. It appears to be that there's not enough significant move to translate words into concrete actions in terms of concrete policies, finances, and substantive programs and accountability measures. So that is one that, again, can be improved in this particular case. But as concrete recommendations, if you allow me to table maybe just 3 on the way forward, to address the challenges that have been discussed by Madame Diop and my predecessors, I would like to encourage, firstly, governments, partners, and there are many different types of partners, starting with the AU, the regional economic communities, but UN agencies and partners, and I appreciate especially constructive partners like Sweden with us here on the panel, to really take this issue of gender mainstreaming very boldly when it comes to DRR. There is a need also to increase genuine political accountability and financial resources for global advocacy when it comes to this issue and action on mainstreaming gender in DRR. This should not be underestimated. There's also a need to improve the conceptual and the practical understanding of the linkages between gender and DRR, as I've said earlier, particularly, and I must emphasize that at the national level, that is where sometimes the translation of the aspiration into concrete actions is lost in the programming. And then lastly, we must also advocate for more institutionalized and individual capacity building when it comes to gender mainstreaming, and developing also proper tools that can also sometimes facilitate the process of monitoring the engagements. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. So thank you very much. You actually brought out even a very interesting point, which could be part of a whole other discussion about the way we misunderstand gender. For a long time, we still think gender is women. And so we can unpackage that for a whole other session, like completely, because it's really one of the key reasons that we also see gender mainstreaming is not necessarily being picked up. You also reminded us about representation. It's still very low. Women participating in peace processes, women, and I will even go further and say women even in financial advisory roles, especially around peace building, we still have very little or very limited representation of women. So we proceed to Ms. Suzanne Mikhail, who is joining us from UN Women Regional Office for the Arab States. This morning, when you listened to the UN Secretary General's message, he actually talked about the green economy, really highlighted the green economy as a key path for fostering economic growth and development. How does the UN leverage women's potential in pushing forward the transition to a green economy as a cornerstone for sustainable development?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Dear friends and dear colleagues, allow me to start with a distinct number, a figure, 5. 5 degrees Celsius is what this very region, the Arab region, is expected as an increase before the end of the century. That means that the heat that we are on daily basis struggling with in the streets of Cairo with 42 degrees is nothing compared to the around 50 degrees that our children and grandchildren will have to live through. It goes without saying, this number is closely connected to droughts, water scarcity, and then the critical tipping point of food insecurity. Food insecurity in itself, again, needless to say, closely connected to conflicts and famine. Last time we had a large-scale famine in this region, or close to this region, as we all remember with horror, 2011, when more than 250 million people died in the Horn of Africa. Stakeholders in the Arab states are acutely aware of this, and acutely aware of the very distinct impact of climate change on famine and on security, developmental and financial impacts. So what then is being done? That was your question, Madam Moderator, and particularly amongst the UN family. There's been a number of really exciting initiatives coming from this region, but one particularly inspirational one took place exactly 4 months ago. This was within the chapeau of the League of Arab States, where more than 22 member states came together and committed for a regional program, not action plan, not policy, it's a program, to address climate change robustly through women employment. So in many ways, you're addressing 2 severe numbers simultaneously in the region. The first number is the 5 degrees Celsius. The other one is the 24%. 24% is the average for this region in terms of women participation in the labor force. By the way, this 24% has sadly stagnated since the 1990s, and even more sadly because of a very distinct and unique paradox for this region, which is the high levels of education and low levels of employment. What does this mean? Concretely, it means that there's an unnecessary financial loss. We've invested, but we're not harvesting. And this unnecessary financial loss, financial bleeding really, is what the League of Arab States, very close collaboration with UN Women, would want to capture in terms of women employment in the green economy, green and blue economy. What does that concretely mean? It means 2 things. If we want to search in terms of women employment, we need to capitalize on the opportunities in the region. Challenges, yes, distinctively important to focus on, but more so the opportunities to be able to search. 2 unique opportunities are coming up stronger and stronger, the more we look and the more we analyze. The first one is in the area of, and maybe not so surprising, climate smart agriculture or green rehabilitation of farming lands. As we know, there's around 50% of farming land in Africa that is not being used. We're not using it simply because of war and because of climate change. In our own region, 50% of farming land in Iraq, 30% in Syria at times, in 2015 in particular, were not used at all because of conflict. So it's about green rehabilitation of farming lands, which means solid and water conservation, agroforesting, etc., etc. And with a large number of women in those processes. And for women distinctively to secure, of course, land rights, which is also uniquely important issue in this region. The other economy, or the other part of the green and blue economy, which we see a potential of surge of women, is actually the area of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And here the region has a unique opportunity because there's a larger proportion of STEM graduates in this region than in any other region. And these faculties, as we know, these 4 faculties are the core faculties behind the science of green, environmentally friendly development program or development initiatives, whether it's biogas production or solar energy. So these 2 areas in conjunction have a great potential to address, again, these 2 numbers at the same time: climate change and women employment. But of course, it's not as easy as this. There's a number of, I deliberately focused on opportunities. I deliberately focused on capitalizing on the existing opportunities. There's a number of challenges, of course, that we simultaneously need to deal with. And one of those is the care. Some would call it care burden. Others would simply be happy to stop by care, which in this region is 4.7 times more for women than for men. But there's a silver lining, and I want to end on a positive note there as well. This is also a region where more than 50% of men want to spend more time with their children. So there's tremendous opportunities. It's about capitalizing on those. And on that note, I also would like to bid all the men in this room and the fathers a happy Father's Day. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We will actually now transition virtually, having talked about STEM. So we have a virtual participant. This is Dr. Basil Jones. I hope he's still online with us, who joins us from the African Development Bank.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
fantastic.
you, Madam Moderator. And I stand on existing protocols. I also want to thank the organizers of the Aswan Tree Forum for putting together this very high-level and impressive panel. Now, for the African Development Bank Group, addressing fragility and building resilience guides our thematic work. And we have a dedicated department called the Transition States Coordinating Office. This is a department that applies a fragility lens in policy dialogues, knowledge products, and operations in the bank. And as you know, over the past 2 decades, the African Development Bank Group has been leading the fragility agenda in the continent, especially for countries that were coming out of conflict, and we assisted countries in their areas clearance and also in their post-conflict reconstruction. The African Development Bank Group Fragility Strategy recognizes the role that women play in the community and as peace builders. The fragility strategy, when it comes to gender, also considers and recognizes gender equality as an enabler for building resilience and creating conditions for social cohesion. there is an alignment between the bank's gender strategy and the fragility strategy. Now, when it comes to gender equality and women empowerment, this is at the core of what the bank does in terms of sustainable economic development and social progress in the continent. Now, for us in the African Development Bank, we recognize that gender equality is both a human right and an economic necessity. So as gender equality is a cross-cutting sector, we institutionalize gender equality and women economic empowerment through our Gender, Women and Civil Society Department, and we have a dedicated team of staff that support integrating and mainstreaming gender in its operations. So we try to, as much as possible, and recently 100% of all bank operations were made gender mainstream, because right now what we do is we ensure that all project log frame has a gender outcome. So we systematically ensure that women are not left behind when it comes to projects, whether it's infrastructure project, whether it's projects in water, whether it's governance operations, whether it's on social protection. We ensure that women are actively engaged, and we have a results framework that measures the outcome for women. Now let's look at some figures when it comes to fragility and women. We know that in countries, in post-conflict countries, girls are 3 times more likely to be out of school than boys. And also in fragile contexts, girls have fewer opportunities than boys. And as has been mentioned by the commissioner from Borno State in Nigeria, 6 out of 10 internally displaced people are women and children. So this is an area where we need to address it, and I'm glad that Madam Commissioner has given us the practical examples of what they're doing in Borno State. So I will not go into that because she has given us more examples on what they're doing on the ground. So I would just like to congratulate her for the tremendous work that they're doing in terms of reintegrating our young women and girls that are in conflict-affected areas. Another thing that we also should be take particular note of is that according to the UN Deputy Secretary General, Madam Amina Mohammed, she also highlighted that gender inequality in Africa is costing sub-Saharan Africa close to $95 billion a year. That's a huge sum of money. So addressing gender equality, especially within the context of fragility, it is not only a moral obligation, but it's also common sense. And there's also a business case to ensure that we'll be able to boost women economic empowerment to achieve inclusive and a prosperous African society before 2030. Now, what is the bank's precise role and operations in transition and post-conflict countries? Like I said earlier, the African Development Bank Group recognizes the importance of women's critical contribution to economic growth. The bank's 10-year strategy prioritizes gender as a cross-cutting issue. And also we recognize when we support women, it is also smart economics. Now, the African Development Bank has been investing heavily in transition states in Africa, or what we call fragile states, helping to build education, strengthening institutions, and providing critical infrastructure, especially electricity, water, and sanitation. And we have dedicated funding from the Transition Support Facility, we call it the TSF, that has allowed the bank to accept a higher risk in countries at risk of fragility and increase strategic coherence to reduce fragmentation and to lower transaction costs in various transition countries. Now, how do we achieve that? We achieve that by conducting robust fragility assessment of the impact of conflict on gender. And it is through this that we are able to develop sound strategies and policies that has been devised to support and mainstream gender in the bank operations. Women, whether they are in fragile setting or in non-fragile setting, want better access to markets, but they often lack the skills, the knowledge, and the network to do so. So in terms of the support that the bank gives to our regional member countries, these are the issues that we integrate into our programming documents to ensure that we offer women better access to markets, we offer them better access to skills, and also better network better opportunities for networking. Now, we also know that as a development finance institution, we cannot do everything alone. So we need to work in partnership. This is where the bank's strategic partnership with the ASEAN Forum is very important, because all development partners have to come together to address the challenges that fragility poses. So we need to work together in a coordinated way to ensure that we address all the issues related to the vulnerabilities that women face in fragile situations. One of the targeted initiatives, I can give a concrete example of the work that we're doing for women economic empowerment, is a pilot project we are working with the International Committee of the Red Cross, and this is supporting women in refugee camps and internally displaced women. Normally when we're looking now at the peace, security, and development nexus, and how do we not just provide humanitarian assistance, but also ensure that we provide long-term, sustainable programs for women in such settings, especially women in refugee camps. And so far, the results that we are getting from this pilot, which is being conducted in the Sahel region, in Timbuktu in northern Mali, in Agadez in Niger, and in Kishira in Chad. This program is supporting women in refugee camps to empower them, and they have been provided with resources, funding for them to start, grow, and expand their small enterprises. And so far, we're getting some very encouraging results. And this is a project that we want to scale up, because we feel that these are some of the ways that we'll be able to ensure that the issues of fragility and economic empowerment of women in such fragile settings are addressed. So before I end, let me just say that fragility is deeply linked to gender inequalities. These gender inequalities are drivers of fragility as well, and they have consequences such as political, social, economic, and environmental. Gender inequalities generally affect women and girls who suffer from the direct consequences, ranging from conflict, sexual-based violence that we've heard from some of the other panelists, and low attendance to school, and even FGM. And it also affects their reproductive health problems, among others. So overall, the African Development Bank has a thorough understanding of the complexities of fragility and that of gender inequalities in transition state. And the bank conducts quality fragility analysis to inform our programming documents so that we'll be able to address the challenges that women in fragile states face. Thank you very much. Let me hand over to Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bassel. So we'll quickly go to Sylvain Marley, who is the Deputy Resident Representative. You just heard from African Development Bank, who said $95 billion is what it costs Africa as we delay gender equality. I even add in the word delay gender equality. So my question to you is, how do we ensure that peace and security, and in particular financing, fosters integrated responses to not only the climate threats but also advances the women, peace and security agenda. And secondly, ensuring that the women's positive agency in preventing conflict and sustaining peace is effectively leveraged in programmatic efforts towards sustainable peace and development.
All right. Thank you, Faiza. I have to apologize for Dr. Abuzar, who was supposed to talk from New York, but she had to move to other commitments. So I'll deliver her points on her behalf. First of all, allow me to thank you for inviting UNDP to contribute to this important conversation. Women's participation and achieving gender equality is central to the achievement of the SDGs, and this is the guiding principle for UNDP. The AU Agenda 2063, especially Aspiration 6, Goal 17, calls for full gender equality in all spheres of life. Recently, changes in the global landscape have been accelerating, and they are intertwined. Therefore, this is precisely why we have to view women, peace and security, the YPS agenda, in synergy with climate change. When we look at the Arab region, or especially the Arab African countries, the region continues to suffer disproportionately from the world's conflict, as well as water scarcity and food insecurity. Climate-related shocks